What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here. Got another pretty interesting video here, that being what if Hiruzen and Danzo swapped fights. I know you guys were expecting the Itachi and Minato fight swap video, and that video is still in the works. I want it to come out good, and will drop on the 8th of December, so don't worry, it's still good. It's coming out really great. With that being said, this video should be pretty self-explanatory, but these characters will be swapping roles or certain positions in the story to fulfill a certain objective or defeat a certain opponent. I have other videos like this on my channel. Check them out, link in the description, all that good stuff. Let's get into the video, guys. Now, for the first round 1 matchup, we have Hiruzen versus 5 Kage Summit Sasuke in Danzo's position. Hiruzen's objective is to defeat Sasuke, with Kerin as support and Obito watching the fight. To specify, I'll be using the Hiruzen that fought Orochimaru. Now, for starters, if you're entering this matchup with the whole Hiruzen greater than the 5 Kage, which means instant W, that's not going to be the case. That sort of statement or line of reasoning is heavily debatable, especially when you get into characters like the Raikage, who are more so a rival to Minato. This is the same thing with the scenario of him outdoing the 5 Kage versus Gyuruguru Zetsu, which is also somewhat debatable and not indicative of a live Hiruzen at this point in the series. Could barely make 2 clones, and dividing his chakra up was like a big thing for him. So I just don't believe, and I'm saying that you can't use these like situations or like reasonings. It's just that these topics are continuous topics of debate, so you can honestly make it sway to one side or the other for whatever you're trying to argue. Now, the problem right away with Hiruzen at this stage in his career is that even if you say, right, he's stronger than the 5 Kage, while he might have that crazy strength, his age makes it so he's not suitable to long drawn out fights, and that more often than not he would lose to certain people. Now, for example, let's say this fight starts and off rip, Sasuke enters his Susanoo. People are going to argue like Hiruzen, you know, is just going to speed blitz because he's the strongest 5 Kage, which means he's faster than the Raikage, which I don't think is true. There's no indication or sign of that. The Raikage does not talk about Hiruzen in that light. He's not using Hiruzen as a milestone for his speed. He's like, I finally surpassed Hiruzen. No, he talks about Minato in this regard. He talks about Minato being the fastest shinobi. With Sasuke being able to throw up his Susanoo and flame control before the Raikage can get definitive blows off on him. So if he's able to do this, especially at weaker stages in the 5 Kage Summit, I feel as if, and during the fight with Danzo, he wouldn't just get straight up speed blitzed. I don't think that's a real possibility for him here. And the problem is, too, if Sasuke gets into a Susanoo, Hiruzen doesn't have any definitive AP showings to say, like, he'd be able to tear the Susanoo apart. Possibly in its lower stages, as the Raikage and Mai were able to crack it. But when it gets higher up, it just becomes too variable, especially since the Susanoo obtains a shield and such. Sasuke also doesn't have to definitively respond just with this Susanoo. Hiruzen's fire style, the Sarutobi cleanse, proficiency, and possibly other jutsu have the problem of Amaterasu being able to tear through them and burn them. Even if you want to say Hiruzen is faster, it doesn't do him much good if he isn't able to breach Sasuke's defenses. So, you know, again, I don't see the blitz attempts happening, which is really evident if you believe like Hiruzen and Danzo are comparable in strength, with Sasuke just purely killing Danzo for 10 minutes straight. Now, with Hiruzen's lore and extensive jutsu knowledge, having a master of all jutsu in the leaf, it's debatable if Sasuke would be able to pull off a few maneuvers that he did on Danzo, like the subtle genjutsu and such. The whole Hiruzen knowing every jutsu is also a little weird. It's similar to Kakashi having over 1,000 jutsu, and that, okay, that's well and good, but like, how do you start giving him techniques that we haven't seen before? You know what I'm saying? It's a little hard to fill in that blank. There is, you know, the possibility of Hiruzen getting caught in genjutsu if he does get caught in Bringer of Darkness, but I wouldn't rely on that point in terms of like taking down Hiruzen. So you can definitely say he has genjutsu countermeasures, but the Amaterasu and Susanoo are different discussions entirely. There's the possibility that while Sasuke is in his Susanoo, Hiruzen can use Earth Release to keep him planted in the ground and perform options, but Hiruzen has no real way to pull Sasuke out of the Susanoo. And the thing about Sasuke in this matchup, you know, I mentioned the Susanoo and the shield and stuff like that, but Sasuke's Susanoo would more than likely go through an evolution against Hiruzen specifically, just like Danzo, as his constant questioning about Itachi and Hiruzen's talk about him would more than likely enrage Sasuke, leading to his hatred alongside his power growing. There's a whole lot of sub-discussions to this matchup. For example, how Hiruzen deals with a total of 3 Susanoo arrows that are too fast for Danzo and require Kakashi to instantly Kamui, which you could interpret to be kind of like a narrative step up in terms of speed, as Kakashi only Kamuis as a last resort, even against Pain, Kakazu, etc. So there's a possibility while Hiruzen fatiguing himself from a drawn-out fight actually does get straight up sniped. And not too many people will bring this up, but, you know, Sasuke was repeatedly killing Danzo while Danzo has his senses and physical abilities drastically boosted via Hashirama cells and Sharingan, as even Madara notes in the war that with a comparable Hashirama buff, that being the Hashirama face, he's able to see what's coming very quickly in proportion to what he normally can see. So I think the buff via Hashirama's face is actually pretty substantial, at least in terms of like sensory abilities. If Hiruzen also does use Enma, which, you know, is very likely, it would take heavy damage from Sasuke's Chidori Blade, which Sasuke implies at the beginning of Shippuden to be more potent, or you could say having higher AP than Orochimaru's Grass Longsword. So in a situation where they swap blades, it's also not favorable for Hiruzen. Hiruzen's arsenal and stamina just aren't suited for this fight, as evidenced by his original fight with Orochimaru, where he only begins to take common ground when he has a ridiculous amp from the need to protect the village, paralleled by Naruto getting the same type of amp against Gaara. Hiruzen even making 3 shadow clones in his original fight was considered a detrimental and extremely risky move. So in a battle of attrition, he's not going to win it either. Now, there is the chance, however, that, you know, let's say Hiruzen does survive against Sasuke Susanoo. He's able to weave it out in the same capacity that Danzo somewhat could, and he's willing to forfeit his life to stop Sasuke. He can bind him with the Reaper Death Seal, making it so he can't initiate any jutsu. And here it would be the same scenario with Orochimaru in a sort of tug-of-war. And the problem with this win con is that it's very viable, but Sasuke actually does have some safety railings in this fight. On top of the factors all mentioned previously, Obito was more than willing to join the fight at any time, and was going to join in when Sasuke's fight against Danzo took a bad turn and he had the curse mark placed at him and was running the risk of death. So I think it's interesting to talk about if Obito could pull Hiruzen into the Kamui dimension while the Reaper is latched on, but he can actually just attack him physically if that's the case. So Sasuke will have that on top of Karin continuously pinpointing Hiruzen's positioning, so any chances of tactical retreat or moving around the bridge aren't going to be appearing either. Hiruzen's essentially fighting an uphill battle with support, always waiting to jump in and help Sasuke, which just kind of ties into the hopelessness in this scenario if a lot of fighters were in the same position, unless you believe he's like that much faster than Sasuke, which I don't think so. I think they're comparable, or in the same tier at least, based on Sasuke showing with the Raikage. I believe the likelihood of Hiruzen just winning this fight off rip isn't high enough to where he can pass. In which case, again, he doesn't really have any AP to breach this Susanoo. Maybe you could make some assertions off of Giru Zetsu and like his pseudo Shinsu Senju, but the problem is we have no idea how potent those jutsu are. We don't know if he was throwing them out prior. We don't really know too much about him. All we know is that he was messing up the 5 Kage who had just come back from their fight with Madara. But, you know, that doesn't mean he was shooting out those techniques prior. So I would say Hiruzen, just like Danzo, doesn't really clear this scenario at all. Especially true if you think Danzo and Hiruzen are rivals in terms of strength. Next up, we have Danzo versus Orochimaru in the Edo Tensei. Danzo will be taking the place of Hiruzen inside the barrier against Orochimaru in his Edo Tensei, with the goal of being to defeat Orochimaru. Now, off the start of the fight, there is the issue of Danzo attempting to use Izanagi on Orochimaru. And the problem is Orochimaru is the one who actually kind of created the arm and like experimented on Danzo. So he should have like knowledge of it if Danzo did go to fight him. So maybe for the sake of discussion, we'll say Orochimaru doesn't know it, but Orochimaru will more than likely take an observatory role regardless in the fight, as he did in the original scenario, letting his Edo Tensei do the work. Danzo also cannot stop the Edo Tensei in any capacity, even like Hiruzen attempted to do with Earth Style against Minato's coffin. So it just, he can't stop the summoning regardless. Now, next up, I don't believe even if Danzo caught Orochimaru off guard, he'd actually be able to kill him with anything in his arsenal, whether it be his Futon Blade, Wind Style, or any Taijutsu. Orochimaru only really thinks certain attacks like Naruto's like 4-tailed Beast Bomb is gonna really be harmful to him. Susanoo Sword Swings from Itachi aren't any life-threatening attacks for him. So to say even if like Danzo like came at him with a kunai, there really isn't too much of a way to say he kills Orochimaru. And I think Danzo would actually dominate the Edo Tensei pretty hard. The only issue is that Danzo, from the moment he activates Izanagi, is that he's going to be on a timer. And dealing with the Edo Tensei is just going to be expending precious time and chakra. And on top of this, Danzo's not equipped to handle the Edo Tensei, as we have no knowledge of any ceiling ninjutsu from Danzo aside from the reverse tetragram ceiling technique. More on that in a second. And essentially Danzo would just be supplying Orochimaru intel and really stalling, as he has no way of killing either Orochimaru or the Edo Tensei. And the problem with the Edo Tensei too is that they could set up Orochimaru with the Bringer of Darkness, like I mentioned earlier. Danzo is susceptible to Genjutsu. Sasuke made that very clear. So if Orochimaru does somewhat decide to intervene in the fight and not play too much like he did in the Hiruzen fight, it would be too much for Danzo, and at some point the Izanagi would run out. Maybe he sustains some damage from undoing the technique and he starts to lose control of Hashirama's chakra. It really just isn't in the favor of Danzo, as he's fighting on a timer, whereas all these people can just continuously regen for that long and stall out. This is also ignoring the fact that Orochimaru and Hiruzen are more than likely superior to this Danzo if you believe that Hiruzen's just greater than him. So what can Danzo do? Well, there's a couple things. So I'm going to talk about Kodo Matsukami in a minute, but what Danzo actually might try to do is take down and seal all three opponents and himself, like he tried to do with Sasuke and Obito. However, if Sasuke, while fatigued from his fight with Danzo, still has the strength and ability to jump away, Orochimaru should also be able to. The problem for Orochimaru, however, is that they're inside a barrier, much smaller, I guess you could say comparable to the ceiling sphere created. So this might be a case of him having a barrier erected, actually getting the better end of the Sannin and being his own undoing. Orochimaru could easily just yell for Sakan to dismiss the barrier like in the aftermath of the original fight, but the way the fight progressed, he more so wanted no interruption. Even when like he was getting his soul ripped out, he didn't want them to dismiss the barrier and come help him. So it's a little weird to talk about, but I do think there is a possibility for it. At this point, it really just depends on how close Orochimaru is during the final points of the fight. I think the better question is if the Sound 4 would be able to react to his commands and Danzo's attacked accordingly. That's more so where like we have to talk about that kind of point. Danzo more than likely can like tango hand to hand, but again, dealing with a 3v1 against fighters all relative or on par with Hiruzen, who Danzo is somewhat implied to be weaker than, is going to be too much. His arsenal is not suited to the situation at all, which just makes it very hard for him to take a W. But there is Kodo Matsukami. Everybody knows it. Shisui's Genjutsu was going to affect EMS Sasuke. It's ridiculous. So the problem is for Orochimaru is that this is kind of Danzo's ace in the hole. Once he uses on Orochimaru, he can really just convince him or have him do whatever he wants. Orochimaru actually has no real resistance to this. Danzo can make, you know, any type of subtle suggestion that he wants, and it would be like narratively consistent, or I guess you could say like consistent in the context of the village being destroyed. He could just as easily be like, listen man, you don't want me, you want Hiruzen, that crusty old beard, like this dude, ain't nobody want him. So there's always like the potential for that. And to be honest, if the fight did start or break out, I could just see like Danzo not even leading with Izanagi and attempt to just Kodo Matsukami Orochimaru off the bat. And this would be what he would have done against Sasuke if he didn't waste it or like had to let it recharge in the 5 Kage Summit. So Danzo actually does clear this round. If Orochimaru pulls out, the Sound and Sand Ninja are going to pull out with him. Next up, we have Hiruzen versus Shisui. We'll say the objective is that Hiruzen has to steal Shisui's Sharingan in like an open field in terms of one-on-one combat with no support. Now, Shisui's always one of those weird characters, you know, everyone's going to talk about, you know, all the basic stuff. Stronger than Itachi, Kodo Matsukami on deck, body flicker god. He's got a lot going for him. Now, there have been many depictions of Shisui and his fight with Danzo, for example, in the Naruto medium, whether that be like Storm Revolution or the anime original content, with the constant theme being Shisui being blatantly superior to Danzo, with him only being taken down due to a surprise attack. The manga leans toward this as well, with the manga statement supporting. There's also the novelization of Itachi's story, which remarks that Shisui's death was a setback for the clan's coup against the Leaf, giving insight to his remarkable strength. Quite frankly, a Kodo Matsukami kind of GG's. I'm going to be honest. It doesn't really matter what the context is that Shisui has to fight Hiruzen. He can just manipulate Hiruzen to like take whatever action Shisui deems to clear the condition. So let's say, for example, right, Hiruzen takes Danzo's place to try and steal Shisui's Sharingan. Shisui can use Kodo Matsukami and dissuade him from the action and actually lead it towards an outcome he wants without it being like just pure manipulation. So yeah, Kodo Matsukami's broken. We all knew this. Shisui's an animal. This is especially true if you believe Shisui is just blatantly stronger than Itachi for a decent point of the series. With Itachi being superior to Orochimaru, who was kind of thrown down with Hiruzen. there's just a lot of lore to suggest that Shisui would be above this. Even like Shisui being superior to the same Itachi, who was swapping venomous words with Obito in the same novelization. Not to take like things out of context or miscontextualize, so I think a lot of people, for example, miscontextualize that conversation. It's just that Shisui has a lot of lore advantages that would put him above Hiruzen, and the hacks are clearly there. Like, we don't even need to go down to the body flicker point, which by nature is Shinobi pouring chakra into their feet for short-term speed boost, which if you were ever gonna argue for homie like speed blitzing anybody, it would be now. It would be this character. Just like Minato and his MO, this is the character to do it. So for whatever reason, Hiruzen isn't gonna clear, especially if you take the anime where like Shisu just places Danzo under a genjutsu. It's just, there's no real way. So Hiruzen does not clear against Shisui. For round 2, we have Danzo versus Giru Zetsu, who's on like the Buddha or like miniaturized Shinsu Senju. He's not listed as a user for that specific technique. It could be a variation. It could be like him replicating it. We don't know. And Danzo would be an Edo Tensei in this situation, and his objective would just be to simply repel the Giru Zetsu. Even if you argue Danzo can make 5 clones, we have no idea if his jutsu is near as potent as Hiruzen's. Maybe you can make the case since he was able to tear the back of Sasuke Susanoo somewhat open, but he really wouldn't be able to stalemate the statue in the same manner if Hiruzen could, just due to the elemental matchups. The fire might just clap Danzo's win style, so there's always the issue of that. A much better argument would be like Danzo using Izanagi as an Edo Tensei and taking Giru by surprise via that strategy, which is possible as Suigetsu rushes him from the side when Team Taka's doing that combo. So it's not possible. The issue is more so a ranged one with Danzo having no real way to traverse all the arms getting shot at him from the wooden Buddha. We don't know the exact range of Izanagi in terms of like where it can respawn Danzo if he so chooses. Danzo is able to respawn a decent bit away from Sasuke, but to say like he'd be able to choose anywhere across like a whole battlefield to respawn, it's a little weird. I'd assume there have to be some sort of like radius for the technique. If you go off the like anime canon, like Itachi's explaining the Izanagi versus Izanami, then he actually might just be able to like respawn right behind Giru when they're like respawning entire like battlefields of shinobi. It's ridiculous. Maybe you argue Danzo summons the Baku to assist him against the statue and somewhat stall it, but considering like a simple fire style in its mouth was able to take it out, I can't imagine it has some ridiculous durability or anything like that. So there might be a chance there. Again, the problem is with this approach, however, is that even if he has his Sharingan arm as an Edo Tensei, the eye still will close. It's just like almost pointless since their Edo Tensei would only like really be there to respawn Danzo. So it's a little weird, but, you know, he should still have the same limitation, especially if Itachi is losing his eye to Izanami. So Danzo really shouldn't be able to clear this matchup. He just doesn't really have, like, the ability to, like, combat this giant force like Hiruzen does and defend, like, such a widespread area with his arsenal. He's just not really suited to it. So Hiruzen doesn't clear both scenarios, whereas Danzo actually clears one of them, which is interesting, actually. I didn't expect that when, like, going into this discussion. So let me know if you guys agree, disagree, why. Let me know down below like what your opinions are on the matter. With that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Keep a lookout for the Itachi and Minato video in the future, and bye-bye.